Alright, hello everyone, it's Ferric and welcome to a special type of video. Basically, there was a new patch to Wizard101 that came out this morning that affects PvP in a lot of ways, and also yesterday there was a dev diary released by Ratbeard which is titled PvP State of the Meta, in which he talks about some of the new updates that were reflected in this patch, and also he details a lot of the problems or hot topics of the current PvP meta and how they plan to address those things. Now, in this video, I will be reading that dev diary out loud and giving my thoughts on it as a player who's played PvP, but has also played PvP from a newer player standpoint, because I used to do a lot of PvP back in the day, but very recently, at least as of the spring 2021 update, I've started doing some more ranked PvP as, you know, a new player experience at max level. So I'll be able to give some of my own feedback on it, my thoughts on it, and I'm also going to look at some of the changes that came out this morning in the actual game itself to see what's new. So those are the main two goals of this video. The links to the dev diary as well as the patch notes can be found down in the description below. I also wanted to point out that I do stream live at twitch.tv/ferric every single day of the week at 3 p.m. Eastern time, and the rest of my schedule can also be found down below. Make sure to follow me there. It helps me out a lot. I know we recently hit 10,000 followers, which is just absolutely insane. And then also the balanced budget walkthrough does return today as well. It will be streamed live as well, so make sure to come check it out. Leave a follow. It helps me out. As always, relevant links can all be found down in the description below. Anyways, without further ado, let's just jump right into things. So here is the dev diary PvP State of the Meta by Ratbeard. Now, one thing I just noticed real quick is that you can actually see all the previous dev diaries over here. If you check right here, select different posts. I didn't know this, so this is actually really nice because I've always had trouble in the past trying to find some of the PvP dev diaries in the past. You know, for example, like, you know, if you want to see PvP Rochambeau, these types of things. So you can actually see the previous dev diaries right up here, which is really nice. So anyways, we're going to look at this one right here. This is the most recent one. This came out just yesterday. Today is March 17th, so March 16th, that's when it came out. Anyways, let's get right into things. So we're going to scroll right in, just so it's bigger and easier for y'all to see. Anyways, here we go. Let's just jump right into things. So we have PvP State of the Meta. Hello, Wizards. Since our last major update, Lemuria Fall 2021, we devs have been gathering feedback about the current PvP meta, influenced heavily as we expected by the introduction of the Rochambeau spells. In order to put those feedback channels to the test, I recently conducted a little experiment via my daily Twitch stream. Before the stream, I wrote down all the things we'd been hearing from players, and then during the stream, I asked viewers to call out in chat any PvP issues they have. I figured I'd award points to any player who could name an issue that was both A, not on our list, and B, not already part of work in progress. And then I thought it might be fun to engage with the chat and stack rank those issues in order of priority, to the players at least. So, real quick point I want to mention out, and I will leave a link down below to this as well, but Ratbeard does stream 5 days a week on the weekdays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, around that time, for around an hour to an hour and 15 minutes or so, and those streams are a great way to give him feedback on things you want to talk about in the game. He can answer a lot of your questions if you have questions about how something works in the game, or, you know, any thoughts on future updates. You know, if there's things that he can say, obviously he does answer a lot of questions, so that's a great way to give him feedback and also to learn more about, you know, design type things. And also he's playing Wizard101 and Pirate in the background in those streams as well, so I'm gonna leave a link to that down below. Make sure to check out those streams if you do have the time. I think they're a great way to learn more about, you know, what their design philosophy is. So anyways, let's continue on with this. So before I get into the stack rank, let me briefly mention that our efforts towards 5th Age, at least with respect to the amount of art, programming, and design resources currently dedicated, are at the highest point they have ever been in pursuit of the 5th Age launch. Players don't even see the tip of the iceberg with respect to these efforts. While our efforts are aligned around meeting specific milestones, players don't see updates as frequently as they might like, and so they would assume that we aren't aware of the problems and or aren't working on solutions for them. Now let's get into the stack rank. What follows is the list of PvP issues in roughly the order that players felt they should be prioritized, along with our thoughts on each issue. If you'd like to check out a link from the highlights from the stream, here's a link. So this basically goes back to one of the streams where essentially this dev diary is it you know, expands on the topics that he talked about in that stream. So for those of you that were there for that stream that he did, it's going to be addressing a lot of those issues. So the first big topic right here, jading / healing. We use the term jading here loosely. It doesn't just apply to players who equip jade gear. In fact, most builds don't require jade gear, so just nerf jade gear isn't actually a solution. When we refer to a jading player, we're specifically talking about a player who builds their gear and deck in such a way as to win by simply outlasting their opponent. In this context, Outlasting the opponent could mean taking the match to timer and trying for a timer win. It can also mean making the match so unappealing to play that the Jade's opponent simply quits in frustration. Key to this strategy is the lack of any proactive plan to win the match by reducing the opponent to 0 health. We're taking 2 approaches to solving this issue. We'll be taking a look at when and how healing outpaces damage. Because I expect these dev notes to be as lengthy as is, I won't go into too much detail in regards to how we determine how much healing is the right amount. I'll just reiterate that we consider healing to be a legitimate damage mitigation strategy, just like shields or weaknesses, and that healing is essential to a proper functioning Rochambeau and core to the life school identity. In regard to this effort, we are specifically looking at the incoming healing stat, and we have long-term plans to phase out this stat, but in favor of more interesting stats. In the short term, we expect league functionality to allow us to disable or severely curtail the incoming healing stat. Our ideal endgame is that healing is usable without being abusable. Our second approach to tackling Jades is to look at how they use the timer as a win condition. We'll discuss that below under timer stalling. So right here, the main thing that I get out of this part right here is that, and I'm really happy about this, is that they're looking at the incoming healing stat. Now, basically, if you look at in-game right now, you get 1 flat resist jewel socket, you get 3 flat resist jewel sockets. Depending on the wand you have, you can get an extra 2. And if you're actually using the Uber amulet, you can get up to 5 total flat resist, or I guess I'm calling them flat resist because I socket flat resist, but square sockets. And you can literally socket, I'm pretty sure I don't have them because they're really, really difficult to get. But if I actually go to jewels here, let's see, do I have any? I probably don't have any, but basically with square jewels, you can get healing jewels, and you can use that to give yourself a crazy amount of incoming healing. And obviously, a while back, we've had an update where damage limits were introduced to the game. As you can see right there, that 140 damage is down to 137 for PvP because there's damage limits in the game. Same thing for resist as well. After Pierce, if my resist is 54, it's only going to be 52 resist. However, for heal boost, there's no stat limits. So sure, it's a legitimate, mitigation strategy, but there's no limits right now to healing. So normal lives with their normal healing is possible to, through the use of infections and other things, you can counter it, and it's still really, really strong, but it is counterable. But there are some strategies in which they max out their incoming healing stat, and then also with gear, their outgoing healing stat is also really, really high, and their satyrs and their heals do a ridiculous amount, and there's just no limit to that, and that's what allows for healing to be too OP. Those specific strategies are where healing can be a little bit too strong, and they're basically, it's nice to see that they do have short-term and long-term plans. Their long-term plan is obviously to make another stat more viable, so whether that's flat resist or it's a new stat for square socket jewels or whatever, we'll see how that goes. But obviously with this league functionality, which is something that they've been talking about for a while, it is nice that they'll be able to adjust things. They'll be able to get more information to see what is actually a problem, and that's going to be really, really nice. So pretty excited. I'm really happy they're finally looking at stats for healing, because obviously life should be able to heal, but they need to balance, and this is really hard to balance. They need to balance how much they should be able to heal, and I think an important thing an important way to do that is by looking at the healing stat, which right now, doesn't have any kind of stat limits. So anyways, enough rambling. Next section, PvE strats, blade or trap stacking. As I mentioned in a Twitch stream, we disagree with the use of the term PvE strats as a pejorative used to describe players who are making use of the tools provided by the Rochambeau to engage in simple, straightforward strategies to achieve win conditions. This was part of our intended design. The gambits in Rochambeau are built around stacks of hanging effects, so it should not come as a surprise that newer or more casual players who approach PvP at the most basic level are finding success with stacking strats. But the Rochambeau also introduces multiple counter spells to every possible stack of hanging effects. More experienced players of the Rochambeau meta are expecting to see entry-level opponents building stacks of hanging effects, and so these players will be looking to convert stacks of hanging effects into things that they themselves can use to ramp to victory conditions. These experienced players are anticipating their opponents converting their effects into their own effects, and so they can prepare to convert them yet again, and so on. Experience next level thinking designed to anticipate your opponent's ramps and gambits is part of the Rochambeau gameplay. This all hinges on whether or not the gambits have relative parity in terms of setup, pace, and damage, and whether the ramps have relative parity. Real quick before I move on, I just want to give my quick thoughts on this. The whole PvE strats thing, if you guys remember back to when I did, for those of you that did watch me do, PvP back in spring 2021, before the Rochambeau came into the game, I would always complain about PvE strats. and how they were too OP. But obviously, since the Rochambeau came out, they finally... I haven't really complained about it since then, and that's because the Rochambeau gives you things that help you address these strats. Now, obviously, with Trap Stack at the very beginning of the meta, people were complaining about how OP it was. But then, you know, players eventually started using the Rochambeaus to start countering those strats. And then now, if you ask someone about Trap Stack, you know, there's like, at least if you ignore Life Trap Stack specifically, which is the Jade Trap Stack strategy, which is probably overpowered because of the healing that Life has, which is, you know, a different issue. Trap Stack strats by a good player are completely counterable if you know what you're doing. So with Trap Stack strategies, there's actual counters to them now. Now with Blade Stack, that obviously, part of that has to do with the fact that Storm and Death, and I guess Life technically as well, but not really because it's an Oni spell. But at least for Storm and Death, their Gambit spells, their ×2 Gambits, were very, very easy to meet and also very easy to buff at the same time. But even then, even with them being super overpowered, there were possible ways to actually counter them, and I might go into that a little bit later on. Basically, I found out a really cool strategy where I was able to beat really high ranked players that use those Blade Stack strategies at a very high win rate, pretty much 100% win rate on my Ice Wizard, because the way they play is very, very linear. So if you can figure out a way to counter them, you pretty much figure out a way to counter them in every single matchup, because once again, their strategy is very linear. It's very formulaic. So anyways, let's continue on where we were right here. So one player observation was that while it's straightforward to use Writing the Scales to counter a Trap Stack strategy, Eye of Vigilance did not seem as effective in holding off Blade Stackers. We have taken this feedback into consideration and made a subtle yet effective change in Eye of Vigilance so that the pips generated from the removal of offensive blades are returned to the defender. This right here is an amazing change. This makes sense. The spell still works in a way where it's still kind of the same. It still removes charms that are both either negative or positive from either you or the enemy, and then it gives you or the enemy or both, you know, equal amount of pips to how many were removed, a maximum of 3 obviously. But it works in a way where this spell now works exactly like Writing the Scales did, which is remove 3 traps and give you 3 pips, or remove 3 wards from your energy and give them 3 pips. So you could remove 3 wards off your enemy, but then you end up giving them pips. But you could also not remove any wards off the enemy. You could just remove 3 traps off of yourself, and then it gives you those pips back that you spent on the spell. So it was a very effective counter to Trap Stack, but Eye of Vigilance just didn't work that way. Now, the reason why this is a great change is because, as you can see, so clear 3 charms on the enemy, and then give you the 3 pips back. So this now works exactly, in my opinion, it works exactly like Writing the Scales now. You clear 3 of your enemy's buffs and give yourself the pips back. So before you cleared their traps to give yourself the pips back, now you clear the enemy's other type of buff, which is blades, on themselves, and then give yourself pips back. And it still can work negatively against you because, you know, you could also clear weaknesses now, but you give your enemy, so you could clear debuffs that the enemy places to make your spells weaker. Before, with Writing the Scales, their shields make your spells weaker. So you could clear their shields, but then you end up giving them pips. In the same situation here, you could clear weaknesses off yourself, and then, you know, but it gives your enemy pips. Now, this is also important because one thing that some Life Wizards did is to counter Threefold Fever, which is the triple infection spell, which is a very effective counter. Some Life Wizards would run Eye of Vigilance, and then this would allow them to run a different Mastery Amulet, because the way these spells work specifically is that because it gives you 3 white pips back, you can effectively spam this spell infinitely and gain tempo off this spell, because if your opponent uses traps on you, and you use this spell, you take off 3 traps, it costs them 1 pip to use those 3 traps. You took off those 3 traps for 3 pips, but then you got those 3 pips back. So you effectively passed, but you passed in a way where you remove traps, and your opponent still has to spend pips on those traps, which is what makes it a really effective counter. Now, Eye of Vigilance works in the same way. Now, Life Wizards that try to counter Threefold by using a 3-pip spell, they won't get their pips back. In fact, they will give their enemy those pips to keep on stacking more. So indirectly, this forces Life Wizards now to use other spells as weakness counters. Obviously, the way I see them switching now is Life Wizards might start using an Ice Mastery now and using Jinn's Vexation to convert those weaknesses onto the opponent. But just in general, I think this is an amazing change. And this is going to allow for strategies where you don't need to use a Balance Mastery, and you don't even need to, you're not even forced to use an Ice or a Death Mastery to counter Blade Stack now. The only 2 Rochambeaus that gave universal hanging effects were Death and ice. You convert blades to weaknesses on a death with putrefaction. You convert blades to shields with wall of blades on an ice. Those are the only 2 schools, which means you are forced to run those 2 masteries. But now you have choice in your mastery now because of the spell. So I think this is a very, very good change to blade stack in general. If just this change was added to the game, this already solves a lot of problems in my opinion. Just because now there's a universal blade counter that any school can go for without being forced to use a mastery, which is really, really nice. And then like by being forced to use a mastery, I mean they can use another mastery. So this is a huge change in my opinion. Anyways, let's not stay too focused on one specific topic. This is just a really, really nice change, so that's why I wanted to talk about that. So anyways, Drain meta. Drain meta, next topic. One of the most interesting and perplexing complaints to come up recently is that Wraith is overpowered. Wraith was released with Wizard101 and has not changed in over a decade. Any suggestion that Wraith is overpowered without explicitly acknowledging that the meta has changed around Wraith is suspect. Yeah, it do be a little sus. I'll agree with that. Wraith is good for a couple of reasons, chiefly because the meta has changed, such as all drains are now good. It also occupies a unique niche as a 6-pip spell, meaning that it gets maximum value from Solar Surge while still being cheap enough to be spammable. It is undoubtedly true that drains are better than ever simply because PvP has become more of a chip meta than ever before. For several updates, we have been making changes to slow down the pace of PvP, moving steadily away from big hits on command, removing pre-enchants and the ability to enchant shadow hits, for example. It was with a vision of this pace that we resisted calls to stop giving death drains and just give them some big hits. Drains are horrible, they can't compete. It was really just a few months ago that we were inundated with comments like this. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I was one of these players. I think, at least like in between like the spring 2021 and I believe summer 2021 and like, you know, after that I took a break from Wiz or something like that. But in that time when I was playing, I would always complain that Death Scion was super weak and that this was the old Scion because drains are too weak at only 50%. Now, to be fair, in that meta, you know, it was this whole where is it at? Let's see, big hits on command. It was a big hits on command meta. You could enchant shads and it was hard to realize, like, it wasn't really a chip meta, and drains just simply were not as good. I mean, they still probably were good. It's just that because people were able to just do so much damage, so a S'mores could very easily do like 6,000 damage, which on pretty much any school except Ice, it could literally do 6,000 damage because you could enchant it with a shad. You could, you know, literally double blade Fire Elf, Infal, Bubble, S'mores, and like it would literally do like 6,000. And you know, it's hard to come back from that. That's not really a chip strategy. That's literally doing more than half your health in just one hit. But now obviously it's a lot harder to pull that off because of the Rochambeaus preventing you from being able to double blade into shad and stuff like that. And also, you know, like it's just not being able to enchant shads also changes a lot of things. So obviously right now drains, like the delta on them is in between fire and storm's damage delta per pip. So that's what makes drains really, really strong. They have been strong this way for a long time. It's just now PvP is in a meta where it's either you stack up and one shot or you chip them down. There's no like there's no like crazy high damage like out of nowhere, which is, I think, is really, really nice. A lot of people have been asking that for a long time. They don't like that you can just in one turn just do a ton of damage without having that much, without putting that much effort into you know, using that combo, you know. So that's really, really nice. Alpha striking is the term that they've been using. But anyways, so yeah, in the short term, rather than focusing on specific spells, we'll continue to fine-tune the pace of PvP so that drains find their niche as a useful and thematic tool for death. In the long term, you should expect to see us explore other ways to counter drains by introducing spells designed for that purpose. So this is nice because they're not just immediately nerfing drains, because, you know, the solution to something that's really, really good in the game is not just, hey, let's nerf this. It's, hey, let's find a creative way in which we don't just nerf it out of the, because it feels like sometimes either a spell is nerfed out of existence or that it's simply too strong. There doesn't seem to be like an in-between. So the best way to find an in-between is to find another way to address it. Tower Shield is still a strong spell in PvP, but to nerf Tower Shield, instead of nerfing the spell itself, you add a spell like Steel Ward, which is super strong to counter Tower Shield. So, and I'm pretty sure that this dev diary is also going to talk about Steel Ward specifically. Anyways, next section. By the way, this dev diary is pretty long. I don't know how long this video is going to be. This is going to be a long video, but let's move right along. All right. Timer stalling. Simply put, we are removing the timer as a win condition in 5th Age. Thank you. Thank you. My goodness, dude. The timer should not be a win condition. That is no, only certain schools can even meet that win condition. There shouldn't be a win condition that only one or two schools can meet. The win condition should be that your opponent's HP is 0. There should be no other win condition. That is the win condition in PvE. That is the win condition in every other game mode. There's no other game mode that has a win condition where timer runs out, except Beast Moon, Monster Mayhem, but that's like a whole separate issue. That's a whole separate thing. The point is, PvE in that game mode is always going to be doable. They need to add a timer. But anyways, that's besides the point. So yeah. Any match that goes to timer, regardless of which player's clock ends first, will be considered a draw, and a draw result, both players lose rank. Furthermore, we have adapted the infraction system from Beast Moon, identifying a draw as an infraction. If you accumulate too many infractions within a short time frame, you will receive a cooldown suspension from the PvP queue. This is really good because this is an issue that we obviously have known for a while that, because, you know, in his morning streams, he's talked about this a lot, but a draw... So a tie game, a timer game being a draw is going to... people are saying that, hey, it's just going to make people start trolling people now. People that are behind will just, you know, they'll see that they're losing anyways, and just to be annoying, they'll stall out the match and they'll lose less rank off of it, and they'll also negatively affect their opponent. And, you know, that kind of stuff will happen. Or people will use it just to troll streamers or whatever, or just to troll certain players. And this right here, infraction system, for those players that do that a lot, they're going to receive a cooldown, which is really, really nice, you know? I think that's really good that they're also tackling that potential issue that arises from this as well right away. So that's really nice. When this comes into the game, I don't know if this is already in the update, by the way. The patch notes that are out are by Atmoplex. So I don't and you know, they seem to include everything that I've seen in the game, but I don't know if, you know, timer. It doesn't say that there's timer stalling is in the game yet, or an update to this in the game yet. So yeah, I don't know yet if this is in the game, but yeah. So. If you are a typical player and you experience draw results with typical frequency, the infraction system will not trigger a cooldown period for you, but we expect players who are jading to experience an inordinate number of draw results, as this will be central to their current strategy in every match. Thus, the infraction system will be tuned to penalize jades without penalizing the typical player, to include players on defensive schools in mirror matches. This system will also penalize players who frequently attempt to switch to a stall strategy in order to force a draw result and a mutual loss of rank. This right here is for those life wizards that you're beating them in a game, they're not really healing that much. They are healing every now and then, but later in the game, when the timer gets closer and closer to 0, they see that, hey, I'm actually losing this match. This guy's damaging me more overall. You know, when the net damage is faster on their end than it is on my end. Hey, now I'm just gonna start spamming Dryad because I went second in the match and the timer favors me, and now I'm just gonna win off of that. I've lost a couple of matches to that, and I'm also mainly PvPing on an Ice Wizard, so it is kind of hard to counter that. And they have Dryad as a heal, and Ice doesn't have a way of stopping Dryad other than Infection. And you know, obviously Infection is a way to counter that, but still, like, I still don't think that you should just be able to Dryad your way out. Like, Life is the only school that has that win condition where late game they can just do a crazy X-Pip burst heal. They don't need to worry about their pips because now they went second. They can just win off of timer. So this is really, really nice. It is essential that players provide good feedback on the frequency of legit draws so that they experience in a typical play session, so that we can tune the infraction system to catch bad actors without infringing on the typical player. When all the necessary framework is in place to prevent stalling, we will reassess all the parameters of the match timer, including the total amount of time per player and the timer floor, currently set as 5 seconds per player, but likely to change. This is good because I think I've said this a lot before, but in order to see what's wrong with the game or see what's an actual issue, first, like, things that are like stand out as the issues, which is okay, I'm wording this really, really terribly. Find a way to change it in a way where you can first find out more information about the issue. And in this case, an infraction system will now show which players exactly are the ones that are stalling stuff, and it gives them more data. So, I mean, this paragraph explains it perfectly. There's no reason for me to go in more detail. Like, this really explains it well. They're implementing the infraction system, and that's going to help them further improve the timer system, so that way, because I feel like the timer for certain schools is a little bit is a little bit short, so it kind of forces you to play in a way that's a little bit faster. I think it could be a little bit longer, but, you know, these types of things we'll be able to know exactly how much is needed once this, you know, like when this necessary framework is in place, you know. So that's pretty nice. All right, the big part of the roundtable. I mean, a lot of this stuff is big, and that's the point. You know, these are supposed to address a lot of the big outstanding issues that people see. So, Blade Conditional, Storm Scion, Death Jinn, and Life Oni. The 3 gambits that trigger via a Blade Conditional allow the player to use a blade both to count towards the 4-pip blade requirement, as well as to pop those blades to buff the spells themselves. So this is where, you know, so if we look at... Oh, well, that is unfortunate. I thought I was still spinning. Okay, we're going to ignore that real quick. So basically, with the gambit spells, it consumes 4 hanging effects to double the damage of the spell. Obviously, for spells that require blade or trap conditionals, if it consumes 4 buffs, then obviously you're thinking, well, what happens to those 4 buffs? Do they count or do they not? For trap gambits, it consumes 4 buffs, and whatever 4 buffs it initially consumes, which are the 4 latest hanging effects that were on you, 4 traps, those 4 consumed traps, they cannot count to buff the spell. Those are deleted, and they just times 2 the damage. They beat the times 2 gambit. But with the Death Jinn, the Storm Scion, and the Life Oni, those 3 spells that are Blade Gambit spells, those 4 initial blades, if they were different blades from your blades that were, you know, your other blades that you had on you, if they were different, not only do those 4 blades that are consumed double the spell to meet the times 2 gambit, but if those blades are different, they actually count towards buffing the spell. So if you had 4 different 35 Storm Blades, if you had a trap gambit, you had 4 different 30 traps, 4 different kinds of 30 traps on the opponent, it would consume all those 4 traps, and then it would just double the damage on the spell, and it doesn't matter what those 4 traps were, it just doubles the damage on the spell, and nothing else happens. With the Storm Scion spell, if you had 4 blades that were different like that, it consumes those 4, doubles the damage, but then each of those 4 blades count towards actually buffing the spell too. So with that, it not only helps you set it up normally, as, you know, just it takes 2 turns to set it up, but now if those 2 turns involve 2 buffs as well, now you've not only set it up in 2 turns, but you've also double buffed the spell. So that's what made those spells insanely OP. So obviously, that's what this means right here. We intend to revise the functionality of them so that they're more in accordance with player expectations and game balance needs. This is basically like, you know, I feel like they're probably going to make it work just like trap gambits. But although all of our resources are currently dedicated to 5th Age Initiative, we expect to complete all necessary revisions before the launch of 5th Age. However, in the short term, until we have new functionality, we will temporarily disable these gambits to provide some relief to players. Yes, thank you. This is great. This is awesome because, you know, sure, it was, quote, working as intended or whatever, but obviously not the way they wanted it to. I guess, like, the wording on that, maybe I'm just not understanding it correctly, but the wording on that, in my opinion, was really, really weird when they talked about, you know, like, working as intended and all that stuff. But basically, if it was OP and they do have plans to change it, I feel like, you know, disabling things in the short term is really, really good. Other games that I play, if there's something that is really, really ridiculously unbalanced, in this case, Scion and Death Jinn, even though there is technically a way to counter them, it is only really easy to do it on 2 schools, Death and Ice, because those schools directly counter Storm on the Rochambeau wheel. And any other school, it's just insanely difficult to counter those strategies. There's a way where you can just make it super, or at least feel super unbeatable. So, and obviously, it's to the point where, you know, even they're considering changing it. But obviously, you know, like, we shouldn't have to wait until a major update where they end up changing it, because obviously, there's a lot of things that use Blade Gambits and not just PvP that are probably going to be broken as a result of them, like, trying to rush out an update that changes these. So they need to take their time with that. But it's nice that in the short term, they're disabling these gambits so that they're not, like, these problems are not in the game. So remove the problems short term and then fix them. That way, and that's kind of what they did with Salamander as well, because obviously damage over time spells will probably change as well at some point in general. But Salamander is an outstanding, really crazy OP spell. So removing that as a factor by changing it the way they did is just a good way to do it. Disable something temporarily so that you address the meta. Do that fast, because it's not super hard to do. You know, you kind of just have to change some values. At least, you know, again, I don't work there, so I don't know how it's like to change these things, but that seems like much easier than doing a whole update, potentially breaking a lot of other stuff just to change certain spells. So this is really, really nice that they're open to disabling things short term and stuff. So yeah, new rewards incentives. We're pleasantly surprised to see rewards so close to the top of the list, especially since, of course, the plan Since, of course, we plan to provide incentives to 5th age players, we plan to tease some of these rewards soon, but we'll drop a small hint here to say that some of the coolest new rewards we have planned don't just require new art, they require entirely new programming. So this is really, really nice to hear. We have a spring update coming very soon. I don't know if these rewards will be in that spring update. Probably not, because this is 5th age, and I don't think 5th age is going to be this spring update. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but it's really nice that, like, require new program. That means it's something really, really big. If it requires new programming, that's something huge. So I'm excited to see what this is about. Steel Ward. This is something that I have a very strong opinion on, and I do tend to take their side on this Steel Ward thing because I think it is a good spell. So anyways, let's see here. Steel Ward. You knew Steel Ward would make the list, right? If you had an opportunity to hear our musings on Steel Ward, we'll recap here. It's good only because Tower Shield is good. Tower Shield is great. In fact, it's the perfect play to swing tempo back to yourself and build pips at the same time. This is something that can be proven mathematically, by the way, y'all. But I'm not going to get into that right now. When we were designing the Rochambeau meta, the prevalence of both set shields and tower shields inevitably came up. We knew that players had an over-reliance on set shields, volcanic and spirit shield, and that various shield counter ramps would penalize players for generating unused shields via the set shields. So, for example, if you spam Volcanic Shield, eventually you're going to have, and against a Storm Wizard, eventually you're going to have a lot of unused Fire Shields. So you can now be penalized because if you keep on doing those, now a Storm Wizard can later on be like, hey, I'm just going to turn those shields into, for example, one thing that Storm Wizards use a lot is they use Fire Mastery, and they turn those shields into heal over times, which helps set up their Jinn condition really, really easily. And those hanging effects for the heal over times last for 5 turns. So... and obviously, like, so the, we got Rochambeau things to counter those. So anyways, I'm gonna keep on reading. And that the various counter shield randoms would penalize players to generate unused shields via the set shields. We anticipated that players would respond to that danger by relying even more heavily on tower shield, and we anticipated that Steel Ward would provide important counter pressure to that play. We also anticipated that Storm would be able to power hit through tower shields, and that players would be encouraged to pack single Storm shields, but this adaptation has been rare and far too long in coming. Okay, I'm going to be honest, and this is where it's unfortunate that my Wiz connection is timed out. I don't feel like logging into my account, but I actually do pack single Storm set shields, and I don't really lose the Storms on my ice anymore, because, and I started packing those because of the Blade Stack Scion strategies. It's a very great counter to that, but yeah, this is right. Storm Wizards are the best at hitting through tower shields. It only takes 2 buffs to basically mitigate the damage of tower shield. And Storm has so many ways of buffing their spells. They have Rain Beetle, they have the Thunderwing spell, and their hit and bubble is the strongest too, except for fire. But in terms of a 4-pip hit and bubble, they have the strongest one. So Storm can do things to get 3 buffs up very, very easily. And Storm getting a wide open hit just does a crazy amount of damage. It's very, very dangerous. And so Storm Wizards, they'll hit through tower shields and still do a crazy amount of damage, to where they're like the one school where hitting through a tower is actually probably a good move in a lot of situations. And so, you'd think that people would start packing single Storm shields, but, they just start packing the Volcanic shields, and then Storms that have Fire Mastery, then they set up their Jinn very, very easily. So, but yeah, if Steel Ward is frustrating your attempts to use tower shield, then it's working as designed. Rather than banning or nerfing Steel Ward, as some players have suggested, our inclination is to add spells that will be similarly frustrating for players who pack Steel Ward. So this is really cool that they still, like, one, I think Steel Ward is perfectly fine the way it is, but, it is cool that they're also open to, like, if Steel Ward does become too OP, because there are some people that can just pack infinite Steel Wards, and then even though they don't rely on tower shields, they'll always win the Steel Ward war, I guess, because Steel Ward is a ping-pong spell. It's 1 pip. People can do it back and forth over and over again. So it is nice that that they also have they're also trying to, they don't want that ping pong thing to just go uncountered or whatever. So they'll probably at least their inclination. They said their inclination. So they probably don't have anything specifically planned, but they are thinking about it with this. So that's good to hear. Deck fails / pre-enchants. Deck fails are usually presented in the context of a plea to bring back pre-enchants, which of course is an implicit complaint about the pacing of matches. So while we have not closed the door on pre-enchants, we would still prefer to address pacing issues in other way first. Okay, so it's nice to hear that they're not completely against pre-enchants. Obviously, I think Ratbeard touched on this more in his streams. They don't want to, if they do bring back pre-enchants, it wouldn't be in a way where you'd be able to plus 300 enchant a spell, because they don't want you to be able to pull a super OP enchanted hit on command, and that you can still pack hits inside. It's just that you can't enchant them. But obviously packing hits inside, if they're equal to the unenchanted spell, that's obviously not good enough. So there has to be like a middle ground to do that if they do bring back Pre-Enchant specifically. But you know, they're gonna address it in other ways first, which is nice to hear. Q sniping or setting. We're looking into the various ways that players attempt to Q snipe and integrating them into the infraction system without providing details, as those details can sometimes be vid infractions. We already have some infractions ready for 5th age that should curb this behavior. Additional actions are required. We can add them. Players must understand that we cannot police actions that take place outside of our game, and that enforcement inside our game needs to be impartial, data-driven, and largely automated. So this is really nice that they are doing something about Q sniping, and also it's nice that they added this part right here. Take place outside of our game. So this is a basically a message to streamers that talk about getting Q sniped and stuff, because I'm gonna be honest, I watch a lot of PvP streamers and a lot of people just throw out accusations of Q sniping even when they have zero proof, or just like literally just off of a good play or off of a weird play with no other considerations to, you know, maybe that person deck filled and that was their only good play. A lot of people that are, you know, innocent just get accused, and I've like a lot of my friends a long time ago in the past have definitely been accused of this a lot, and I don't think like it like and sometimes a streamer will be so you know, they'll be so convinced of the fact that someone is you know, sniping or whatever, they'll be like, hey, can this player get banned, you know? Well, now you're asking them to ban someone that you don't have any evidence of whether or not they're actually cheating. So, and they can't do that, you know? So this whole data-driven, largely automated thing, I like that. So however they go about addressing the Q snipers, it's still gonna like address it in a way where, you know, people that Q snipe people in game, if there's a way to legitimately prove in game that they were Q sniping, that's great. But obviously if you don't have proof, then like, I mean, well, you're gonna expect them to just start banning people off of no evidence? Nah, that's not good for the game. So anyways, that's my take on that. Toxicity exploits, reducing toxicity and punishable exploits, suspend accounts that engage in toxic behavior or exploits. We have and will continue to close code loopholes that allow exploits in the first place. So this is good because, one, they're going to work on the things that allow the exploits in the first place, the coding bugs, and also it's nice that they're going, because just because there's a bug in the code, that doesn't give you the right to negatively affect other people's playing experience and cheat. So it's weird, like for some reason, and like I've seen a lot of people defending the cheaters, and Wiz for some reason is like one of the few games where I've seen cheaters defended. So like in any other game you won't find people defending cheaters just because for abusing an exploit that's a result of a bug in the game. Like people don't defend that for some reason. In Wiz, if something's an exploit, and I've experienced this in Beastman as well, it is okay to use an exploit that is clearly not intended and supposed to be bad, but it's perfectly okay to use it because, hey, it's not our fault, it's in the game, there's a bug in the code. So it's nice that they'll actually, you know, they're willing to punish people that have that garbage mentality. So anyways, pay to win. This right here, I'm so happy about. While we are not ready to share details, it is our intention that the best 5th age PvP gear stats are always available by investing time. Oh my goodness, dude. I've been wanting this for literally years, dude. And finally, dude, we have a confirmation that you can get the best stats by grinding. You don't have to pay money to get the best stats. This is really, really nice to hear, if you so choose. And the if you so choose part is nice because, sure, some people like that you can just pay to skip part of the farming process and get a piece of gear that is really, really good and useful. But you shouldn't have an advantage because you choose to play that way, in my opinion. So that's nice that this is a thing. We'll be addressing this through gear audit, as well as our new loot model for spellments, and greatly expanding access to both. So by mentioning spellments here, we'll probably start seeing this stuff in the spring update, because we know that the spring update is going to be a lot of like really spellment based and stuff. Anyways, this has been a long video, y'all, so, you know, let's try not to stall out too much. Grow the player base. Since we're closing in on quite a dev diary now, we'll mention the last few items on the list only in passing. Solar Surge access, pet ward talents, low-level PvP, cloak. So these are things that they will address. It's just that they're not going to go, like, this is a super long dev diary. I've been recording this for 40 minutes now. This is literally going to be almost an hour-long video, but Anyways, we can spend the last few lines addressing this point. Grow the player base. Of course, we want to grow the PvP player base. It's the reason for all the work we've put into the system, especially over the last few months. Work has been difficult, but also dedicated players. We are very, very grateful for your loyalty. Confident that we are moving in the right direction, moment-to-moment PvP gameplay, but also how we communicate with you, how we gather feedback, how we support is our hope that and our expectation that 5th Age will not be just a new beginning, but a foundation for lots of exciting PvP gameplay for years to come. Thanks, Ben, Ratbeard Durban, lead designer, March 16th, 2022. So, yes, they're trying to bring in new players, which is really nice. Because an important issue in PvP right now is I have a bunch of Warlord characters. I am captain on my ice right now, and it is literally impossible. I don't know. It's weird. Like, once you hit captain, that's the level where most people just get stuck at, and this is something that Warlords will not realize because they don't create new characters. They stay on their Warlord characters. They're like thousands of ranks, so they're always going to be at that rank. So, but people that are at the low rank, first off, they should have some say in the whole PvP thing. Like, you can't just say that just because you're a captain, your takes for PvP are garbage. Because listen, you're stuck at Warlord. You don't know what it's like to PvP down here. You just kind of, you might watch some people do it, but there's not that many people that actively like queue at Captain that make content. A lot of those people that make content typically tend to be at Warlord, and the people that do queue at Captain don't really talk about the fact that once you hit Captain, it's hard to find matches because there's just not that many people queuing at Captain. A lot of people are either like below Captain, so they're like Knight, maybe even like Veteran or below. So you can actually get matches at those lower ranks. And then if you're at Warlord, you can get any kind of match. So you get match, and there's a lot of Warlords as well. But at Captain, it's really hard to find matches. And in a lot of cases, you're just sitting in queue. You're just waiting for a match. And it's going to end up being a PvP Warlord. To which, even if you're really, really good at the game and you have, you know, roughly a 50-50 win rate against Warlords, you're still not going to rank up past Captain because you get plus 16 rank, minus 16 rank. So obviously, one way to address that is by implementing an elo system, because on my Ice Wizard, I've beaten so many people that are like 3,000 rank, 3,800 rank. I beat a 4,000 rank player in queue, and I only get plus 16 rank for that. And then if I lose to that player, I get minus 16. So I've lost to a 2,000 rank player, I've lost to a 2,500 rank player, and I lost 16 rank the same amount. So I should not win only 16 elo for defeating a player that's thousands of rank higher than me. I should not lose an entire 16 for losing to a player that's thousands of rank higher than me. So obviously an elo system is one way to address that, but obviously, you know, having more players and being able to actually fight other captains and other commanders is also nice. So it is good that they want to add more people in PvP, and obviously they want to do that. And you know, the way they're trying to design PvP is in a way where, you know, new players are encouraged. Like gatekeeping, I guess, is the term to use here. PvP should not be gatekept to where only the old OG players can enjoy it and no one else wants to play it, because you know, like there were a lot of things broken about PvP in the last few years. Very rare TC, pay to win gear, a whole bunch of issues, and these fixes will make PvP in a way where there is a system that makes sense, which is the Rochambeau system. The utility is standardized, it makes sense. And then, you know, pay to win gear, toxicity, fair play, all these issues, if they work very well, that will encourage new people, not new players that are new to the game, but players that have not really tried out PvP much before. It will encourage them to play the games. Those are just my general thoughts on this. You know, I've been giving my thoughts on each point specifically as we've been going through them, but I think this dev diary talks about a lot of things, and I'm really, really excited to see a lot of these things in play. However, some of these things have already been changed in the game in the update that came out this morning. So at this point, I'm actually going to transition over to Wiz and talk about some of the changes that have come out in the game as of this morning. Alright, now to really quickly at the very end of the video see what the exact changes came out this morning. Now I'm going to be going through these pretty quickly. The patch notes can be found down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. But basically, we'll take a look at Scion of Storm. As you can see, Scion of Storm, that's kind of funny. It doesn't have the no PvP symbol. It just has no. It's just no, dude. Just no. You can't use it. You can't use it in PvP. You can't use it PvE. You just can't use this spell. Do not ever use this spell. I think it's pretty funny. So yeah, Scion of Storm right here. Death Jinn also has that no symbol. You can't use it because all blade gambits are removed from being used in any game system right now. Right here, Primal only, also no. So all blade gambits, you cannot use them. Also, Guardian Spirit was made no PvP, but I don't have it trained on my life, so I'll just show a little screenshot of what that looks like. But yeah, Guardian Spirit is no PvP. So that's another change. If we look at our spellbook, Hephaestus has been nerfed. So I predicted that it would be around 350 average damage after the nerf. Before it did an average of, it did 425 to 475, so the average damage on the spell was 450. I predicted that would be nerfed to 350, but obviously if you look at this, it's 340 to 420, so it has been nerfed to do an average of, what was it, 380. 380 damage is the average damage on now, so it's a little bit stronger than I thought it would be, but it's definitely received average 70 damage nerf, which is, or sorry, 80, yeah, no, 70 damage nerf. It is a lot more in line with the other spells. Obviously, it being a lore spell, also it being a 5-pip spell, still make it very strong. It still receives a 250 buff from Solar Surge, but it definitely brings down the damage of it a little bit, and also fire has been nerfed in other ways, so I feel like this change shouldn't hurt fire too much, but it does prevent fire from just being brainlessly heavy spamming the whole game, winning bubble control, and doing a crazy amount of damage in the process. So this also just audits the spell. The spell did not meet their audit requirements because they have like a whole formula they have for auditing spells. So I don't know the exact formula. I don't know exactly how they look at doing two things at once. For depending on the amount of pips, especially for these hit and bubble spells, which is why I kind of was guessing when I looked at how much damage Heffy would do. So, but yeah, it does 340 to 420 now. Before it did 425 to 475 before. Also, if you look at these set shields right here, these are not changed, but the important thing is fire shield is an 80 shield, so a single set shield is a minus 80, and a double set shield is a minus 70. But if we look at the treasure cards now, the treasure cards previously were minus 85 for the set shields and minus 75 for the double set shields. But these have now been audited so that they're standardized just like with their normal trained versions. Same thing with Tower Shield. It is no longer minus 55. It is minus 50. And that applies to all of these shields. So that is the latest change with that update. Obviously with the previous update, Spirit Blade and Spirit Shields and basically the Tri-Blades and Tri-Shields were already standardized as well. Which is, it's just nice that they're standardizing it because, you know, that addresses the whole issue of people spamming, you know, packing infinite TCs of these kinds to help some of those gambits. Standardization just reduces a lot of, factors that you have to consider when balancing things, which makes it a lot easier to balance. So I think in general, it is good that they're standardizing. Now, this does not only affect PvP, this also affects Decathlon as well, because Decathlon, you use a lot of these shields. Obviously, we did the balanced Decathlon recently where we were using Tower Shield, Tri-Shield, and the Tri-Shield change was already reflected in the balanced Decathlon. But yeah, Tri-Shield, these set shields. So this will obviously have a change in Decathlon. I don't know how big of a change it will have. Obviously, players will feel a difference as well with how much extra damage they take, but it's a change that we all saw coming. Obviously, this started all with the spell audit that started way back in summer 2020. So, you know, this is, or was it spring 2021? I don't remember. It was either summer 2020 or spring 2021. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was summer 2020. But yeah, so all this stuff we've known is coming for a while. Now, one thing I will point out is that weakness is still minus 30 when the trained weakness is normally minus 25. I don't know if they have plans on changing that as well. Because they didn't change it in this case, I think they might keep it the same, but at the same time I also don't know, because mathematically if you hit with a weakness and a blade up, it's going to do less damage than if you hit with nothing up at all. But if they change it to 25, then it's going to do slightly more than if you hit with nothing at all. So that does change something if they were to change weakness. So I don't know if they're going to do that, but that is something to consider. Now, for the last major change from what I can see is obviously the Eye of Vigilance change. I already showed that in the dev diary, so there's really no point in showing it right here. But if I go to my balance character right now, as you can see, Eye of Vigilance, it clears enemies, positive or negative things on you. It clears the enemy's weaknesses or blades and gives you pips for doing that. So it either clears something positive about them, which helps them boost their spells to give you pips, which works the same way as Riding the Scales did. So it could clear a trap on yourself, which buffs your enemy, and it gives you the pips back. So the same thing with Eye of Vigilance. Now, if your enemy had a blade, which was a buff for them, it gives you the pips now. So it makes sense and it works, even though it's like reversed from what it did before. It now works in a way where it makes more sense to where both of these spells are designed to counter. This is designed to counter traps pretty well, in a way where you don't have to actually use a balance mastery. And now this right here counters blades in a way where you don't have to use a balance mastery. So that's pretty nice. But one last thing that I forgot to mention, and this is because the patch notes from KI officially had not been out yet, so we didn't know this, but the resist and damage intersection / limits for stats have also been adjusted, and they've been adjusted only for PvP. So this does not affect PvE at all, obviously, because this is primarily a PvP update. But basically, and it's a very small change, but the resist intersection and limit got nerfed by 5%, so it got reduced by 5%, and then the damage, just the intersection, not the limit, got buffed by 5%. So the damage intersection started at 125% damage before, now it starts at 130% damage. The resist limit started at 70%, and the intersection was at 50%. Now the limit is at 65%, and the intersection is at 45%. And an effect that this has is, with this specific setup on my Ice Wizard, I have 70% resist. And if you look at the bottom there where it says the PvP symbol, I have plus 59% resist. Previously, before this update, it would have been 61% resist with 70 resist. But now it is 59%. That is the effect that a 5% earlier intersection has. So this, if you think about it, this kind of nerfs ice slightly, and then it kind of buffs storm and fire a bit, because storm and fire were the two main schools that easily made it well past 125 damage, so they got affected by the damage stat a lot. And so they've adjusted that with it's a very, very subtle change, just 5% buff on the damage end and a 5% nerf on the resist end. And obviously in this case for the resist, it only affects it by 2%. So with fire and storm, the damage is probably also similar. In fact, I can probably go to my fire right now. Alright, now I'm on my fire character just to show you what the damage thing looks like. Now, I don't really have a PvP setup on my fire right now to compare this to, because I haven't done PvP on him in a long time, but this right here for the damage, as you can see, that number at the top is 189 damage. That's how much damage I would have before any kind of limit or intersection would be in play. So that 189 damage, I actually have the old calculator up, and I can leave a link to that below as well. But basically, with 189 damage for PvP, that would be a 2.618 multiplier, which would mean it would show 162% damage at the bottom there, because it does round up, but now it shows 164%. So that's the effect that the 5% increase on the damage has at this damage number. I'd imagine it would be about the same, like probably 2 to 3% more. If you are a fire or a storm wizard, you probably have like a little bit more damage now, because the intersection does start a little bit later, so it starts to affect your damage a little bit later, which is a buff to fire and storm. So those are the only two updates that I missed out on. Everything else, I'll leave the links to the updated patch notes officially from KI. Spark posted those patch notes. I'll leave a link to that down below as well. Those are the main changes. As always, the links for everything can be found down below. That is pretty much the update. That was the dev diary. I'm super excited. I'm actually really, really excited now, especially because of the free-to-play thing. That's one of the biggest things for me. Also, I would still like to see an elo system in PvP, but obviously, you know, if they can find a way to bring more players in, that would solve some of the issues. And also an elo system is something that, you know, they'd have to put in a lot of consideration into, but a lot of these other balancing changes are going to be really, really nice, and it is really nice that they're looking at all these things and addressing them, and hopefully making PvP in a way that's fair, balanced, but also enjoyable by veteran players and also new players. And we'll see how the implementation of these things work. Hopefully, you know, obviously if things are bugged, it is a little hard to enjoy PvP when things are not working as intended, but, you know, hopefully they do work. And I'm really excited for this spring update. The test realm is probably going to come out within like the next few weeks. And then the update usually comes out in April. And these things, you can literally tell these by just looking at their history of updates. There's always an April, July, and November update every single year. That's been the case for like the last 7 years, I'm pretty sure, something like that. So expect an update in April, which means test realm usually happens 2 to 4 weeks before that update. So, and you know, right now we're in like mid-March, so you know, update coming soon, test realm coming soon at least. So yeah, anyways, this was the video. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I know it was a super long video. I'm gonna have to edit parts of it because you know, I literally just woke up, saw these changes, and I was like, because last night I literally fell asleep thinking, hey, I'm gonna record this video tomorrow, but these changes came out and there's a lot more changes than I thought there would be. So you know, but yeah, anyways, this is the video. Let me know what you think about it down below. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to check out all the links down below. Make sure to follow me on Twitch. The Bounce Walkthrough series does return today. at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to check that out. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Much love. Stay safe out there wherever you are. Have fun. Enjoy the game. And as always, have a good evening.